My mother's hand slammed against the table so hard the plates rattled. "She's the one," she said, pointing straight at me. "The prophecy warned us. She will destroy this family." I remember the silence first, then the whispers, then my Aunt Diane pulling her youngest child closer, as if I were something contagious, as if standing near me might pass along whatever curse my mother had decided I carried. I was 16 years old. I had done nothing wrong. I would never. My voice broke before I could finish, but no one looked at me. Not my cousins along the far wall. Not my uncles with their arms folded. Not even my father, who sat at the head of the table staring at his hands. "She can't stay here," my mother said, her voice flat and cold. "If we keep her, we lose everything. The prophecy is clear." And just like that, they chose a prophecy over me. My name is June Cassidy. That was the night my family erased me. My father slowly pushed back his chair and stood up, but not to defend me. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't meet my eyes when he finally spoke. "Pack a bag," he said quietly. "Just what you need for now." I begged him. I kept my voice low, pulling at his sleeve the way I used to when I was small and scared. I told him he knew me. I told him none of this made sense. I reminded him I was his daughter. He pulled his arm away gently, the way you'd move a piece of furniture blocking your path. "It's for the family," he said. Nothing else. No apology. No explanation. 15 minutes later I was stuffing clothes into a duffel bag with shaking hands. The sounds of the gathering drifted up from below. Voices, laughter, life continuing without a pause. I zipped the bag. I turned off the light. As I walked down the hallway toward the stairs, my younger brother Cole appeared from the shadows near his bedroom door. He leaned close. His eyes moved quickly toward the staircase to make sure no one was coming. He whispered something that made my stomach drop completely. Cole's voice was barely a sound. "Mom said it had to be you," he breathed. "Or her secret comes out." I went still. The bag hung heavy on my shoulder. The hallway felt like it had narrowed around us. "What secret?" I whispered. But before he could answer, Aunt Diane appeared at the top of the stairs and called his name sharply. Cole flinched. He gave me one long look, the kind that carries far more than words, and walked away. I stood there alone. I had spent the past hour believing this was about faith, about a prophecy that had grown inside my mother's church, spoken by a preacher who talked about curses and chosen ones. I had believed the family went along with it out of genuine fear of God. Cole's words destroyed that belief completely. This was never about a prophecy. Someone knew something. My mother had needed me gone before it surfaced. I walked out the front door and into the dark. I didn't look back. But I filed away every word Cole had said. I was already sure deep inside that I would need them later. The relative who took me in was my father's cousin, a woman named Glenda who lived 40 minutes away. She had a spare room with a metal cot and one window facing a brick wall. She pointed me toward it, told me not to touch her things, and returned to the television. No one from my family called that first night. Or the night after. Within a week I understood what was happening. The story had spread through our community faster than I could have imagined. I was dangerous. I was the cursed one. People said it the way you'd say someone had brown hair, like an unquestioned fact. My mother had made sure the story traveled far. Aunts whispered to neighbors. Neighbors told church friends. Church friends told their children. By the time I walked into my new school, the word had already arrived ahead of me. One afternoon I passed Glenda's kitchen and heard her on the phone, voice low and steady. "I don't want her near the children," she was saying. "You know how these things follow people." I kept walking down the hall to my room. I did not cry. School was supposed to be the one place my mother's reach couldn't touch me. I was wrong about that. I felt it in small ways at first. A teacher who was polite but rarely called on me. A guidance counselor who suggested I might be more comfortable in a different lunch period. 2 parents who formally requested their children be moved from my homeroom. I only found out because someone left the office door open. I had done nothing, said nothing. I had barely spoken to anyone. But my mother had already contacted the school, framing her words carefully as concern, for the community, for other students. She never said the word curse out loud. She didn't need to. I started keeping to myself. I ate alone. I studied hard because grades were the only thing I could control. Every good mark felt like proof I was still real and worth something. Then one Tuesday afternoon in February, I found a plain white envelope inside my locker. No stamp. No return address. Just my first name on the front in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. You weren't the first. I read those 4 words 4 times right there at my locker. Then I folded the letter and put it in my jacket pocket. For 3 weeks I tried to figure out where it had come from. I asked no one directly. I just watched who looked at me a beat too long, who glanced away too fast when our eyes met. Eventually a small detail led me to a woman who had once been part of my mother's church community. Her name was Harriet. She was maybe 60 with silver hair and careful eyes, and she had moved to a town 20 miles away years back. A former member of my mother's inner circle, someone mentioned once without thinking. I knocked on her door on a Saturday morning. When she opened it and looked at me, the color left her face. She gripped the door frame. Her eyes moved slowly across my face, taking in every feature like she was comparing me to a photograph she had memorized long ago. You look just like her, she said softly. My heart was already beating faster before I thought to ask who she meant. Harriet made tea. She moved slowly around her small kitchen like she was deciding how much to say. I sat at her table and waited. Finally she placed a mug in front of me and sat down. There had been another girl, she said. Years before me. A young woman named Wren, a cousin on my mother's side. Though I had never once heard that name while growing up. Nobody spoke about Wren. She had been quietly cast out years ago, before I was old enough to understand the world around me. The reason? Prophecy. The same prophecy. Almost the exact same words. She would bring ruin, she had to go. The family had chosen fear over her, just as they later chose fear over me. Harriet folded her hands around her mug and held my gaze. Wren wasn't dangerous, she said. She was just in the way. I thought about Cole's words in that dark hallway. Her secret comes out. Was there anyone before Wren? I asked. Harriet looked at her tea for a long moment. I think you already know the answer to that, she said. After visiting Harriet, something settled inside me. I stopped waiting for my family to come back. I stopped checking my phone for calls that would never arrive. I stopped hoping my father might show up at Glenda's door and say there had been a terrible mistake. There was no mistake. They had chosen. So I chose to. I chose to survive. I worked a part-time job after school and saved every dollar. I applied for every scholarship I could find. When I graduated high school, I did it without a single family member in the audience, just Glenda 3 rows back watching without expression. College came through grants, scholarships, and refusal to fail. I studied finance and business. Numbers made sense in ways people sometimes didn't. They didn't lie. They didn't decide you were cursed. They rewarded effort every single time. Every promotion, every good grade, every saved dollar felt like proof the prophecy was false. Then 15 years after the night I packed that bag, I was reviewing a legal document and saw my mother's name, Ruth Cassidy, listed as sole trustee of the Cassidy Family Trust. And everything I thought I had made peace with came rushing back. I was 31 years old. I had a solid career as a financial analyst, my own apartment, and a life I had built completely alone. I had not spoken to anyone in my family in 15 years. Not on holidays, not when my grandmother passed. I found out about the funeral 3 days late through an old neighbor's post online. I had made peace with the silence. I truly believed that. But seeing Ruth Cassidy listed as the only trustee of a fund meant to be managed jointly pulled Cole's words back up like something cold rising from deep water. Her secret comes out. I sat at my kitchen table that night with my laptop open and did what my training had taught me. I followed the numbers. I traced the paperwork. I pulled public records and matched them against dates. What I found in those first hours was only the beginning. But it was enough to confirm that something had gone seriously wrong with that trust, and had been wrong for a very long time. I made a decision. I was going back. Not for closure. Not for an apology. For answers. I showed up at the Cassidy family reunion on a Sunday afternoon in late August. No warning. No call ahead. I drove 3 hours, parked down the street, and walked through the gate like I had every right to be there because legally I still did. The yard went quiet in sections, like a slow ripple moving outward from wherever I stepped. Cousins turned around. Uncles lowered their drinks. Someone dropped something and didn't bother picking it up. My father saw me from across the yard. He looked older than 15 years should allow, and something briefly moved across his face that might have been guilt. Then he looked away. My mother was near the back porch talking to two women I didn't recognize. She turned because the silence told her something had shifted. When her eyes found me, her face changed. She had always been the most composed person in any room. Unshakable. Certain. The woman who had pointed at me with total confidence 15 years ago. But looking at me now, in front of all these people who had always followed her word, Ruth Cassidy looked genuinely shaken. "You shouldn't be here," she said. I didn't respond right away. I held her gaze long enough for the people nearby to see clearly that I was not afraid of her. Then I walked to the food table and poured myself a glass of water like I had simply stopped by to visit. The afternoon was uncomfortable. People didn't know how to treat me. Some avoided me entirely. Others stole glances like I was something they couldn't stop looking at. Aunt Diane kept firmly to the opposite end of the yard. About an hour in, Cole found me near the side fence. He was 27 now, and there were tired lines around his eyes that didn't match his age. He spoke quietly with his back to the rest of the yard. "I'm glad you came," he said. "That surprised me." "Are you?" I said. "I've been thinking about what I should have told you that night." He paused, looking at his cup. "I want to meet somewhere we can actually talk. Not here." He pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand without looking at me directly. That night, I saved his number in my phone. We met at a diner in 2 towns over the following Thursday. Cole was already in a corner booth when I arrived. After a few minutes of surface talk neither of us really wanted, he set down his cup and told me everything. Our mother had been using the prophecy for years, he said. Not just once. Not just with me and Ren. It was a pattern. A tool to remove anyone from the family who threatened her control. Anyone who asked too many questions. Anyone who got close to information she wanted hidden. Eventually they received the prophecy. The family believed her because they were afraid. The prophecy flowed through their church, through a preacher named Pastor Holt who had a private relationship with my mother that nobody discussed. He gave her words authority. His name made it feel God-given. She controls everything, Cole said quietly. The trust, the property where money moves. 20 years without anyone checking her. He looked up at me. She forged documents, he said. I have seen them with my own eyes. I didn't let my expression change. But my brother had just confirmed everything. I kept my face still when Cole said that. I had spent years learning to hold my expression when hard information landed. But inside, every piece of what I had suspected was clicking into place. After our dinner, I went home and returned to the financial records I had started pulling. This time I knew precisely what I was looking for. The pattern was clear once you understood the motive. Every time my mother used a prophecy to remove someone, money moved shortly after. Assets were redirected. A piece of land transferred. A fund restructured. Control shifted silently into fewer hands. After Ren was cast out, family property was signed over to a holding company with my mother's name buried inside the paperwork. After I was exiled at 16, 2 accounts were quietly combined under a single trustee, my mother. I lined the documents up and matched the dates. The timeline was not ambiguous. This had nothing to do with God or faith. This was financial manipulation dressed in religious language, practiced on people taught that questioning it meant questioning God himself. Then I found something unexpected. A paper trail connecting my mother to what had happened to Ren after Ren was gone. Ren had not been left alone to rebuild. I had built a life from nothing without anyone chasing me. Ren had not been so lucky. After her exile, my mother made calls. I found the evidence through old records, an email chain Cole forwarded me, and a letter Harriet had kept for years and finally agreed to share. My mother had contacted Ren's employer. She said things, lies wrapped in concern, that cost Ren her job within weeks of being cast out. She spread the prophecy story to people in Ren's new town. Ensuring distrust followed wherever Ren tried to settle. When Ren attempted to consult a lawyer about the trust, my mother made things complicated enough that Ren eventually walked away from every claim she had. Ren had been financially ruined. Deliberately. Systematically. In total silence. I thought about how close I had come to the same ending. One fewer scholarship. One harder year. One less stubborn piece of me. It might have been me. Now I understood the full weight of what I was dealing with. This was not just my story. I did not confront my mother. Not yet. Everything I knew from my career told me that timing was everything. You don't show what you are holding before the hand is complete. You build the case quietly without announcing it while you build. I spent the next 2 months gathering everything I could. Cole became my primary source inside the family, sending documents carefully through encrypted channels we agreed on at our first dinner. Harriet gave me everything she had kept, dated letters, old records, notes held onto almost by instinct. I also found Wren. It took patience, but I found her living in another state, working a modest job, carrying herself in the careful way of someone who had learned not to trust easily. When I first reached out, she didn't respond for 2 weeks. When she finally did, her message was short. "How did you find me?" "The same way I find everything," I wrote back. "I followed the records." We spoke on the phone for 2 hours. By the end, she agreed to add her account to what I was building. 3 days later, my mother called me directly. I almost didn't answer. But I decided that hearing her out was more useful than avoiding her. "June," she said. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, controlled, certain, smooth as glass. She wanted to meet. Privately. Just the two of us. We sat across from each other at a coffee shop halfway between our cities on a Wednesday morning. She arrived looking exactly like herself. Well-dressed, composed, chin slightly lifted. She studied me when she sat down, the way you'd study something you haven't quite figured out yet. Then she slid an envelope across the table. "I think we can handle this quietly," she said. "There is no need to drag old things into the light. You have made your life. I respect that." I looked at the envelope without touching it. "How much?" I asked. She named a number. "It was not small. Some things are bigger than you," she said evenly. "The family legacy needs to stay intact." Then she leaned forward slightly. "The prophecy," she said quietly, "was very clear about what happens to those who interfere." I held her gaze across the table, and I almost smiled. I left the coffee shop without touching the envelope. I didn't call Cole that night. I didn't message Wren. I just sat alone in my apartment for 24 hours and thought carefully about what needed to happen next. My mother didn't understand something important. She thought she was still dealing with the 16-year-old girl who had begged her father in a hallway while holding a duffel bag. She thought money would make me disappear the way it had made Wren disappear. She had no idea how much I already knew. A single public confrontation was also too easy to survive. It could be spun as a bitter daughter returning with a grudge. What I needed instead was for the family to start seeing the cracks on their own, from the inside, before I showed them what was underneath. So I began visiting. Quietly. Attending small gatherings. Slowly rebuilding thin threads of connection with relatives who were curious about me. While I was there, I asked gentle questions. Does anyone fully understand how the trust actually works? Has anyone ever had it properly explained? The first cracks appeared faster than I expected. I had been back in the family's orbit for about 6 weeks when it happened at my Uncle Raymond's birthday gathering. Around 20 relatives, a backyard of folding chairs, and my mother near the grill holding court the way she always had. A younger cousin named Tom asked about the trust. He wasn't being suspicious, just open, the way people are when they haven't learned which questions aren't allowed. My mother began explaining. She was the steward, the protector, the one the family depended on. Then Tom asked a follow-up based on something I had casually mentioned to him 2 weeks before. Didn't the original documents require 3 signatures for major decisions? Not just one. My mother paused. It was brief. 1 second, maybe 2. But in a room full of people who had believed her without question for 20 years, that pause was loud. "There have been updates to the structure over the years," she said smoothly. "Who authorized those updates?" Tom asked. She answered. But 2 relatives across the yard leaned toward each other and whispered. It was the first time I had ever watched someone openly question Ruth Cassidy, and not immediately back down. After that gathering, the questions didn't stop. They grew. I wasn't pushing them directly. I was planting accurate seeds. A document shared here, a careful question suggested there. and letting people's own curiosity carry things forward. Once someone truly starts wondering, they keep going. My mother felt the shift. At the next gathering 2 weeks later, she was still composed, but there was new tightness in her movements and sharpness in her eyes when conversations happened too far away for her to hear. She pulled 3 relatives aside privately that evening. 2 of them found me separately afterward under cover of casual chat, asking questions that told me she was trying to find where the doubt was coming from. I gave nothing away, but I made a decision that night. Questions alone were not enough. People can doubt and still do nothing when silence feels safer. I needed to give them something they could not explain away or wait out. I went home, opened my files, and pulled out the clearest financial document I had, the one showing exactly what had happened to the trust in the weeks after Ren was cast out. I prepared to share it. I didn't release the document to the whole family at once. I chose 4 people carefully: Cole, Tom, Uncle Raymond, and an older cousin named Bev whose quiet eyes missed nothing, and shared it with each of them individually over 3 days. I sat with each person and walked them through it the way I would walk a client through a financial report. No drama. No raised voice. Just numbers, dates, and document names in a clear, readable line. I let them ask questions and answered honestly. When they asked how I found the records, I told them I was a financial analyst and had followed the trail. When they asked if I was certain, I told them to verify it themselves and told them exactly where to look. By the 4th day, Raymond had called 2 people outside the family with expertise in trust law. By the 5th day, Tom had shared the document with 3 more cousins without any prompting from me. The silence that had protected my mother for 20 years was finally breaking from the inside. Then my father called me. He said 3 words I hadn't heard since I was 16. I was wrong, he said. My father and I talked for a long time that night. I held back more than I wanted to say, because anger wasn't going to help anyone. He had seen the documents Tom shared. He told me he had always felt something was off but was too afraid to say so. My mother had made questioning her feel dangerous in every way. The prophecy was a wall around her, and approaching it meant being cast out, just the way I had been. He was not an innocent man. He had handed me that bag. I hadn't forgotten. But he had also been controlled for 20 years by someone very skilled at it. I told him what I needed. Say what you just told me in front of the family. He was quiet for a long time. She'll never forgive me, he said. She was never going to, I replied. You just didn't know it yet. Meanwhile, Raymond had called a family meeting, the first not organized by my mother. Arguments broke out. 20 years of unquestioned loyalty collided hard with financial records that didn't lie. My mother stood in the center of it all, and insisted the prophecy was still real. That was the night I brought Ren into the room. I didn't want her story coming out as gossip, something my mother could reshape before people processed it. It needed to be properly documented. Ren had written a full account of everything. The exile, the job loss, the quiet dismantling of each attempt to rebuild while my mother worked behind the scenes to ruin it. She had kept records, including a letter from someone acting on my mother's behalf warning her not to pursue any claim on the trust. I read Ren's account aloud at the family meeting. I kept my voice level and steady. I added nothing. I let her words do what they needed to do. The room was very still when I finished. Aunt Diane sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes on the floor. She didn't argue. She didn't defend my mother. She just sat there while everything rearranged itself behind her eyes. Others began to speak, softly at first, then louder. Old memories that had never made sense started making sense now. Then Cole stood up and told the room what he had whispered to me 15 years ago in that darkened hallway. Cole's voice didn't shake when he spoke. He had carried that secret for 15 years, and the cost of it showed on his face. He told them what he had told me, that our mother had come to him the night of the exile and said it had to happen, or her secret would come out. He had been 12 years old. He hadn't fully understood. But he had understood enough to know something was deeply wrong, and he had lived with that knowledge every single day since. When he finished, the room went quiet. Raymond set down the papers he was holding and looked directly at my mother. "Did you write the prophecy yourself?" he asked. It was the question no one had dared to say aloud before that moment. My mother didn't answer right away. She read the room the way she always had, measuring faces, calculating who might still be with her. But the room had changed completely. Finally she spoke. I interpreted what was given to me, she said carefully. That is not an answer, Cole said from across the room. In the silence that followed, everyone understood the truth. Things moved quickly after that. Raymond engaged a trust attorney within the week. The financial records I had gathered, combined with Wren's documentation and what Cole had access to, formed the basis of a formal legal review. Within 30 days the trustee arrangement was suspended pending investigation. My mother did not accept it quietly. She called relatives one by one, trying to rebuild her alliances, framing everything as a dispute inflated by a bitter daughter returning with a grudge. Some people listened. Most did not. Because the numbers didn't shift to match her version. The dates stayed where they were. The documents didn't change their meaning no matter how she tried to reframe them. Then Pastor Holt, when reached by a family member asking direct questions, declined to confirm that he had ever delivered any specific prophecy about the Cassidy family. That information moved through the family quickly and quietly. When the trustee suspension became official, my mother called me. I answered. She was silent for a moment. Then she said it. You did this. She said it with complete certainty, like she was still the one holding the truth, like she had been wronged by forces outside her control. I let her finish. I waited until she was done. I didn't destroy this family, I told her. You did. She started to respond. I didn't give her room. You used a lie to take everything from a 16-year-old who had done nothing wrong. You did it to Wren before me. You built your control on fear and called it prophecy so no one would ever question it. Silence. I didn't come back to hurt you, I said. I came back for the truth. And the truth did the rest. I heard her breathing. She said nothing. I hung up. I sat in the quiet for a while. No celebration, no relief. Just the same stillness I had felt walking out of that house at 16 with a bag on my shoulder. This time I wasn't leaving with nothing. Wren was getting legal help. Cole was building something honest. My father was far from forgiven, but no longer silent. And I had my life, built from nothing without permission, without waiting for anyone's approval. The prophecy came true in the end. My mother always said I would be the downfall of this family. She was right. She just never imagined I would only bring down hers.